What's up, guys? Welcome to the August Tidal Gardens live show. How's everybody doing? Hopefully you guys are getting some rest and relaxation this weekend. Me, not so much. I've kind of been just running around this morning quite a bit. And I just got the live streaming set up here, organized, and not even organized. Organized is probably a poor choice of words. Set up at all would be a better verbiage there about 10 minutes ago. So it's probably a good thing that I have like some degree of experience doing this. Otherwise, it could probably be a little bit more hectic. Back in the day, I wouldn't feel right unless I had absolutely everything in place, hours or even like the day before. But now that we've been doing this for, geez, I don't even know, like 6 years, possibly 7 years, it is easier. Having said that, there's always some little wrinkle that's new about these shows. And the new thing is sitting off camera to me right now. It is a new microphone system. It's just the arm, but it is so good. It's a very professional podcasting microphone arm that you probably have seen on your favorite podcasts. But it's kind of like a gold standard-ish arm, and I'm so super impressed with it because unlike a normal podcast that just has like a simple microphone in front of it, I have a gigantic sound enclosing like halo thing, and between that, the microphone, and the pop filter that I have, it's like a substantial amount of weight that has to hang over top of this thing. And I'm just blown away by how well that it manages the weight that I've put on it. I still need to tweak it a little bit because it's still a little bit weeble wobbly, but however I move this microphone arm, it stays dead on wherever I left it. It doesn't sag ever or anything like that. So that is astonishingly good for what I've been rigging this up for. So that's kind of like the new little piece to the show, let's just say. What else is going on? Coming up here, I'm going to be having some guests over, not today, but into next week and into next weekend, there's going to be quite a bit of activity. So I'm going to be kind of just busy cleaning up around here just to make sure that it's like mostly presentable. But yeah, that's kind of the main ongoing things here. Let's see, what other, we got some projects going on. Yes. I'm getting a couple of new protein skimmers from Raj at MRC. They're pricey. MRC is pricey stuff. I've seen it before at other coral farms and stuff, and I've always been really impressed by the build quality, but more importantly, there's only so many places you can go for protein skimmers that are realistically sized for multi-thousand gallon systems. And I had been under skimming my systems to the point where they probably weren't doing very much. So I bit the bullet. I committed to getting 2 protein skimmers from him. And yeah, I think I have to sell whatever remaining cryptocurrency I have to help fund that. It's like, you know what? The crypto thing, kind of silly. I may or may not have made a little bit of money on that, but I think I can make better use of actual protein skimmers on running farming systems at my place. So we are going with that. I haven't been looking at chat at all, so I apologize for that. Let me take a quick peek here. Let me take a quick peek. Tom Gianette, hello. Gardener Steve, Be the Fountain, Ham Corals, what is up? Thomas T. Very nice to see you all. Thanks for coming out. Yes, Reefapalooza is going on in California. I basically had a scheduling conflict with every trade show from now till the end of the year. So unfortunately, I won't be able to make any of them. I would really have liked to, because there was obviously Reefapalooza California that I've never been to. Of all the Reefapaloozas, I guess I haven't been to Dallas either. But there's that. There's the Daytona Aquashella that I don't believe I'll be able to attend. There is the Chattanooga Reef Stock, which I won't be able to attend. Macna got canceled in Pittsburgh. I was really looking forward to that one because of all the ones, that's the one that's within driving distance of me. So bummer, I'm going to miss out on that. This isn't a year for Interzoo, so obviously that's not a thing. Hopefully I can make it next year. There's just all kinds of stuff. But yeah, basically my schedule until the end of the year, not a lot of travel planned. Oh man. So Raj is going to be talking to my club this month. Should be interesting. Yeah. Um, Ask him like the hard hitting questions. Yeah, because there's a lot going on, I guess, with like with his with MRC, or actually just his acquisition of reef builders and a lot of cool stuff, I guess. He and Remy were over here a few weeks ago, and they're just now getting some of the content that they had recorded while they were here published onto their sites, and so that's good. Yeah. And Raj, being the guy I'm talking about, he is really not super self-promoting. I think that he would very much prefer to be in the background. So now that he's acquired Reef Builder, he's kind of been like thrust into the foreground a bit. But yeah, he's going to be getting a little bit more publicity once I actually get some of his protein skimmers in hand, and I can do at least a first impressions of it. Um, I'm like perfectly happy with the Reef Octopus protein skimmers that we've been using, but they are not sized for 2,500 gallon systems. They are louder than I would like. Now, I think they're still quieter than a standard MRC, but I'm not going to get standard MRCs. I'm going to get insane MRCs that have pumps that are substantially quieter for double the price. So there's that. Anyway, oh, what is going on with your guys' tanks? I've kind of been babbling a little bit about my tanks here, so let me know in chat. Okay, real quick, we got about a minute 38. Let me quickly say my thank yous. So real quick, thank you to the two corporate sponsors, Ecotech Marine and Polyblab. And on the Patreon side of things, let's start with Patreon. Angela Sherman, Big Lord Chi, Brandy Camp, which is Be the Fountain in chat, Harkins Aquatics, Jeremy Altman, aka Two Please, Scott Williams, Elaine Martinassi, Alan Jackson, Ann Lewis, Christopher Martin, Chuck Admire, Ernie Wallace, Greg Bauer, Greg Zimmerman, Jordan Marty, Keith Singer, Kyle Jameson, Lisa Clow, Lacree Fine Art, Lynn Holt, Michael Shelley, Puddle Aquatics, Ryan Baker, Skylar Korn, Sue Hemmons, Thomas Tarrant, and Tim Garner. And on the YouTube member side of the equation, we have Mike Downey, Keith Holland, CVin13, JB Bryan, Terry Kuhn, Stories Reef, Herb777, Justin Harden, and Ohio Adventures. So thank you all very much. Okay, let's make this transition go smoothly, guys. We have, I believe, a total of 230 corals on this show, which should take us a couple hours to go through. Hopefully my voice lasts through the whole thing. I've been a little bit oddly congested, and I thought this might have been allergies, but it turns out it was very likely a lot of this Canadian wildfire smoke. I thought we were over the worst of it, but not so much because every now and again we get like this orangish hue in like the air, and it smells like burning tires. And then like the warning advisories start showing up, and I'm like, okay, now's not the time to be out and about mowing my grass, for example. Okay, I'm gonna put my chair down a little bit. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So real quick, I actually wanted to talk about something to do with the corals just a little bit here. So one thing that is kind of interesting is about these. These are they are regularly sold in the reef aquarium hobby, reef aquarium industry, as Bernard Porras. From what I've heard, uh, they might not be Bernard Porras. They might be a species of Goniopora, which ironically, this thing here, this Harlequin Goniopora, might be the only true Bernard Pora that we have. I did hear somewhere that Bernard Poras are typically dusky green in color, not like crazy rainbow things. So it's entirely possible that we may have just gotten lucky in not renaming all of our smaller polyped Goniopora Bernard Poras, because they might all just be a micro variety of Goniopora. The thing that kind of throws a little bit of a wrinkle into that is the fact that the smaller polyped guys, whether they be Goniopora or Bernardipora, they do fight with their bigger polyped cousins. So we have to make a conscious effort to keep them separated. Having said that, visually over time, it seems like a lot of those smaller polyped ones are starting to develop into like fairly large Goniopora, to the point that, at least in our cultures here, they are every bit as large as like a Goniopora that might come in from the wild. It's kind of crazy looking. So yeah, I'm really on the fence as far as like the classification of all that. You know what, one thing now that I'm seeing a couple like leptastria and things like that on the show here. One thing that I am finally getting onto my calendar to do is, if you are looking at one of our stock items. So for example, like we have a lot of the faster growing SPS, like the leptastria, pavona, Cyphastria, things of that sort, Leptoceras. You see how like we're doing this animation where it goes from like a daylight colored light, and it kind of shows you the gradient going to like a more actinic look. I wanted to provide that view onto every stock item coral. And once we built out the new website, we kind of had that in mind, but we were so busy with other things, we never really got to putting that on there. Because, well, we have it on all of them already, but it's kind of like there's a default one. So for example, let's say for green star polyps, because it's on screen, there would just be a single one, like a single color morph that we would have. And if there were other color morphs of green star polyps, it would just show like the one that's green, not like any others. Or so if there was like a hammer coral, it would just be an orange hammer. And if you were looking at like a neon green hammer, the color gradient thing that's in the like the lighting section, it would only be the one. But we've been going through and making a custom color morph specific animation for every single one of these. And so like every single day I go through like 2 or 3 categories of corals, and I've been updating those. So if you haven't been to the website in a while, that's something to take a look at, because it's in the care guide that's like down towards like the, not the bottom, but like you have like the item information up top. But then when you get into like the care tips and stuff like that, the lighting section will have like this animation to kind of show you what that what different types of lighting would do. It's a little bit rough because we have to make it fit within data size constraints, but I think it's a welcome wrinkle because we went through and we did like kind of like a daylight and actinic, like a still image for the item, but there is also something to be said for catching all the different color schemes in between. So again, something to look out for. Oh, okay. So Gardner Steve is asking, you have to tell us your reefing origin story. Did you start with freshwater? What was your first fish and coral? So this was like a long time ago. I mean, I was like a child. I think all this started when I was younger than 10 years old, I think. I think I got my very first things when I was like 7 or 8, maybe even a little bit earlier. Um, it started off with just like freshwater tanks, obviously. Um, and this was back in the day that there wasn't internet really. Uh, you had to kind of like find a lot of information at the library or rely on like your local pet store, and that only gets you so far. I mean, I didn't obviously didn't know what I was doing at all. Eventually, the goldfish became tropical fish. Tropical fish eventually became like saltwater fish, and I think I started with just like a clownfish or something like that. The sort of thing that everybody gets into. And one day, I saw some like just some polyp rocks. They were zoanthus, and of course, like back then, like in the early '90s, those things were like brownish gray at best. And I just had it in a 10-gallon tank. It just had a freshwater power filter on it. But the one thing that I definitely got right, even like on day one, was the way that the water flow happened in that tank. It would, anything I fed in there, like the brine shrimp or whatever, would get carried by just like that power filter current right over top of these zoanthids. And like I could see them feed, they would close up and they would do super, super well. Now, fast forward about a year, and I done screwed up because I got like a 20-gallon tall, which already is a worse tank than a 10-gallon, because a 20-gallon tall is just 2 10-gallons on top of each other, if you can imagine that footprint and that height. So back then, there was really no such thing as reef lighting. You had like a 2 bulb fluorescent fixture, not really enough to keep anything alive. It was also the wrong spectrum, blah blah blah, not good. So already lighting is no good, and because I doubled the height of the tank, it changed the flow pattern from that power filter, so it wouldn't carry food past the zoanthids. Then it got worse. I added a butterfly, and of course that would nip at the only corals that I had. So yeah, I had to learn all the dumb mistakes that you make along the way, but eventually I got better at this sort of thing. Finally, there was like an online reference to these things. Online forums started up. Started with Aqualink. So for the folks that have been around forever, Aqualink was the precursor to Reef Central, which was the precursor to Reef, which is probably the precursor to Facebook. Now, you might be thinking, but there's garbage advice on all these platforms. True, there is. But back then, there was no information at all. And you'd have people doing the dumbest things to try to keep animals alive. Like, it was not out of the realm of possibility that somebody would be thinking, you know what? I don't need to buy aquarium salt. This instant ocean stuff, it's way too expensive. I have salt in my kitchen and legit try to like make that work. Yeah. The 90s, guys, the 90s. You had to be there. Oh, man. Okay. Jake's World is asking, can we talk a bit about parietes? Yes. I think parietes tends to be one of the most misunderstood corals in the industry as far as the SPS goes, because it is kind of like this side afterthought, because mostly people would focus on acropora or montipora or something like that, but nobody really goes to parietes. And if you've ever been like scuba diving in Hawaii, it's like 90% parietes. Like when I went to the Big Island, you could set foot in the water there, and the reef starts at 3 inches in the water. Like that's how dense the reefs were, because there's very few people in on the Big Island, and yeah, all of it, like 99%, I would guess. Like there's so much parietes, but in the hobby, it's kind of this fringe coral, but they're also crazy slow growing in my experience. Um, we only have like a couple of varieties, I think, maybe like a handful, one of which is on point, this Darth Maul parietes, which is arguably the nicest one, and it's not terribly slow growing. The slowest growing one is like the canary yellow one. And I think that that one in particular is slower growing because it takes a ton of light. Like right now, the ones that we have aren't like the super canary yellow coloration. They're kind of like more of like a muted mustard color, because we have to keep corals under a lighting intensity that would work for a bunch of different ones. So there is also some thought that when a customer buys this, they're not necessarily going to have access to like 600 par lights, for example. Most home aquariums, they would struggle to get over 250 par. But I think that in order to get like the really nice canary yellow coloration in something like that parietes, you would have to be blasting with a whole heck of a lot, because my guess, the 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 parietes that I was seeing in the wild might have been getting over like 1,000 par. And again, good timing. We live in the Matrix, you guys. This yellow parietes here, it doesn't look that bad in this video. Like it's definitely yellow, definitely not green, but it is supposed to be like crazy yellow, and you only get that under really, really intense light. And unfortunately, we don't typically have a lot of these for sale because it takes so long to grow them. And notice that they do not really fluoresce. That is a daylight spectrum coral. So if you are a super blue all the time type of reef hobbyist, it's not ever gonna look yellow. It doesn't really fluoresce. It's a very flat pastel yellow. Let's see. Colt G. I overdosed lanthanum and killed everything. That sucks. Would you take all the rock out and riot it, or just do water changes and ICP test to make sure that the lanthanum was gone? So Colt G, I've never used it personally. I think that people use lanthanum chloride as a very aggressive way to try to deal with phosphate. And I personally have never been that adamant about phosphate control. One of my guys here is a little bit, more into that, and so he'll run GFO and stuff. But we've never felt the need to go to those extremes. Um, would I take out the rock? I mean, that's a toughie because I don't know how well it soaks into the rocks. I don't know how much it leaches out. I don't know once it binds up how neutralized it is. So you might be in a situation where you just take every precaution you can, but yeah, I don't really know how to get lanthanum out of your system if it's kind of just nuked everything. Dangles, eagerly awaiting your announcement about the TG Dive meetup. Yeah, me too. I haven't gone diving since pre-COVID. Like, it's been a hot minute. I would like to know when the next time I'm gonna go diving is. How's that? EIY Kumar. I've thought of keeping clowns in kitchen saltwater. Yeah, I definitely do not recommend that. I'm actually gonna go there to scuba in September. Very lucky. I had to cancel three different trips to Hawaii. This is again back during like the 2021 to 2023 ish time frame. I actually had like different trips booked and everything like that, and I had to back out of all of them for one reason or another because at the time there was like a lot of curious travel restrictions. So it would have been risky to hop onto a plane and go to Hawaii. Nowadays, I would love to go to Hawaii, but I've got so many not cost effective projects going on here that it makes me very, yeah, I would feel bad about leaving this place when there's this many projects going on. Um, like I said, that we're getting some new MRC skimmers that they're so big that it is an engineering challenge for me just to install them. Like the footprint of them is almost 3 feet by 3 feet. It's 30 inches by 30 inches. So just think about that for a sec. The footprint of the protein skimmer is 3 feet by 3 feet. And then it's 60 inches tall. So it's 5 feet tall. Yeah. That doesn't fit into too many spaces. And if you wanted to mount it on top of something, you might not be tall enough to service a skimmer cup. And I kind of have a rule here where if maintenance involves ladders, you're doing it wrong. Like you have designed this thing poorly. So I've been brainstorming for like the past couple of days. How do I get this installed in a place without jutting out into a walkway, obstructing some place that I need to roll a cart by, that would then not involve a ladder to service the lid. It's been a challenge, but I'm close. I think I have an idea. Yeah, fun times. First world problems. First world problems. But that type of stuff keeps me from going on vacation. Okay, Serge, any recommendations for a newbie on stocking a Fluval 13 gallon? Okay, got the peach cobbler, got cool runnings on a small island. Cool, cool. Thinking only micro lords on the second, SPS Blasto Duncan on largest. Um, so okay, micro lords and higher light loving SPS might not be the best. And especially once you throw Blastomusa into the mix, because the difference in light that they're going to be wanting, it's going to be that delta is going to be really large, especially in a small tank. If it were me, I would probably stick with Blastos, Duncans, and Micromusa. Um, I think all of those, especially in like a smaller aquarium, will be very easy to feed, which I think is important. And they're the most likely to appreciate like a lower lighting system, which is also good because if you had to get really creative with lighting, you might overheat the water. And if you overheat the water, I know for sure those corals don't like that. In fact, I would probably try to make it slightly cooler than your average like 78-degree tank. It might do much, much better in like 70 to 73 degrees. So having to then extra light that for some SPS might be counterproductive. B, there's going to be a Tidal Gardens dive meetup. How about this? The next time that I go diving, I will just let everybody know. Oh my god. I don't even know what I'm getting myself into. That might be like a disaster. Like, that poor dive company is going to be like, what the heck? Like, we just had like 50 extra people show up for this day. Like, we don't have enough boats for all this. Gardner Steve, how do you feel about bare bottom tanks? I'm moving out of state, so everything is broken down, but I'm considering going that way next. I don't think that they look better, but there is something to be said about how clean they stay, with a caveat. So I would agree that they do stay cleaner if you're running filter socks. We just retrofitted filter socks onto our two big sumps, and boy, let me tell you, I love them. I love them so much. Now they're a maintenance chore. Don't get me wrong, they're definitely a maintenance chore. Cracking my back. But it is astonishing how much stuff that they collect. And just to be able to remove that stuff regularly and not have it break down in your tank is amazing. And I'm even noticing like our aquariums themselves not collecting as much detritus on the bottom. We can be more aggressive about cleaning out our overflow boxes so nothing really collects there. And our sumps are actually getting cleaner. Now we do get in there and siphon a little bit, but we haven't done like the big maintenance where we drain the entire sump, hose it down with fresh water, shop vac everything out. Like we haven't done that. Maybe we did it on one of the two, but we haven't done it on the main most busy system. And I know that because there's a fish down in the sump. And I saw it today. We would have caught him. But if you were running filter socks, a bare bottom tank will get crazy clean, and I do like it for that reason. If it was my show tank, I personally like the look of substrate. Does substrate act like a nutrient sink? Yeah, probably. But again, if you're running like filter socks, every now and again you can stir that substrate up. And I'm a big proponent of siphoning. I know that like there's some folks that are like, never disturb your sand bed. I'm like, nah, screw that. I'm siphoning that thing like every time I do a water change. Charles Finley, does Tidal Gardens ever offer larger colonies? We do, not terribly often because it is a shipping nightmare. Yeah, that's it. Like that is the number one and only reason, because we have tons of ginormous things. We will not ship it to you because I mean we've got corals that are 20 inches in diameter, and if somebody locally wants to buy that, great, it'll be a decent price. But in order to send that to somebody, it will add $100 to the shipping price, just the shipping. And it becomes such a logistical nightmare because there's a really good chance that A, that coral is going to break during shipping. B, that coral is going to pop whatever bag that it's in. So it's not worth it for us to send out bigger things because of the shipping involved. Um, by the way, we just raised our shipping rates. I've been warning people about it for like all year. We finally did it. But even then, it never makes sense to send something that doesn't fit in a small container. But if you're a local customer, local to Ohio or willing to travel to Ohio, and want to shop or pick up locally, you can get some ginormous pieces of coral here, like absolutely giant. But if we're mailing stuff out, it's going to be smaller. Still bigger than a lot of people, but it's going to be it has to be in like the shippable range of coral. I mean, I would love to clean out big colonies. I would love it. In fact, we were recently approved to be a vendor for a public aquarium, and I think some point this fall they're planning on like coming over here with a truck, and I'm like, I'm gonna fill you guys up. Like whatever system that you had planned at your place, I think it might be like a five-figure gallons. I don't know, like 10, 17, not sure. But I'm like, I will fill up all of it. I want to give you guys so many corals, such a good value. it will You will be lucky if your truck isn't dragging on the highway on your way home. Dangles. I asked a couple months ago about tank moves. I took your advice. I'm planning a new tank I can set up ahead of time on the other end, upgrading from 50 to 120. That is an outstanding idea because it's mine. um, that will, it's not easy, but the alternative is so much more difficult. You will thank me. Like it is, that's the way to do it. Like if you're doing a big move, now's the time to upgrade your system. Upgrade or downgrade. And sometimes the downgrade in size is an actual upgrade in lifestyle. Like, trust me, a new tank. Now's the time for fresh beginnings and all those little lessons, hard fought lessons that you picked up along the way. And now is the time to implement all of that. Is during your move. Set up a new tank in your new space. Be the fountain. I'll invite myself when you go to Hawaii. Shocker, right? Right. I don't think that there's a world in which like you would turn down the opportunity to go hang out in Hawaii. Most people wouldn't. I wouldn't. Okay. Pratish is asking, any recommendation on how to combat digitate hydrates? They're making all of my corals unhappy. All right, I'm going to look this up just in case because I want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. All right, I'm going to look. Those things. Do you want the unhelpful answer? They kind of go away on their own. That's not terribly helpful though. There's a different type of hydrate that I had in mind, but this might work for these guys as well. They do not, they don't overpopulate very quickly. It's not one of these things that I've ever seen take over a tank. It's not like Aptasia or vermitid snails or anything like that. But I have seen these things. They do go away over time. If I was terribly concerned about it, I would go straight to your local grocery store, go to the beauty aisle, get some like eyebrow tweezers, and get to work in your tank. Every single time you put your hand in the tank, start yanking stuff out. And over time, and it won't even be that much time, these things will take care of themselves. Like that goes for pretty much any hydroids that I've seen, is that they are surprisingly easy to remove manually. I don't think anything really eats them, so it's got to be you. Elbow grease it. Guank. Greetings from the far off land of Maryland. Welcome. Haven't been to Maryland in forever. I've been to Ocean City, and I remember this is like I guess in my childhood, but I remember going to like an all-you-can-eat crab place, the type that they would just like unload a bucket of like steamed or boiled crab onto your table, and you just basically have like an apron and a hammer. Good times. John Williams, hey, I appreciate the live talk. Can you talk about choosing the correct place to buy corals? It seems like every place talks about an occasional breakout of aptasia or bubble or something. Should I find another location to buy from, or should I just accept I'm going to get some kind of pest? Is any store free of this bad stuff? Thanks very much. So, John, if a store of any size says that they don't have these things, they are either being incredibly naive about what's happening in their systems, or they're being deceitful. Okay? I have seen a lot of places that are really very good. They know what they're doing. They've put a lot of investment in. They have a lot of well-trained staff that they know what they're doing. Every single place has these things because they're in the ocean. I mean, it's a lot of this stuff comes in pretty much at like a microbial level, and if you have scale, it persists in your systems forever. Okay, so having said that, okay, that as an aside, you as a hobbyist will face smack into all of these things at one point or another if you're in this hobby for any length of time. Now, if you have like a smaller aquarium, you might get lucky and just simply not run into an issue with any particular pest. So like, ooh, I've never really had Montipora eating nudibranchs. Never really had Montipora either, but it's like that sort of thing, okay? But the idea that you're going to shop somewhere and you will never have a pest issue that's nobody's reality. Like straight up. You have to try to keep these things out of your home aquarium. Honestly, you will likely fail because these pests are so much better at this than the typical hobbyist. They're so much better than an experienced hobbyist. They are so much better than most, if not all, cost no object, serious business farms. Like, they're really good at what they do. You have to learn how to control these things so that it is not a problem. Because let me tell you, if you have an obligate corallivore problem going rampant in your systems, let's say you have acro eating flatworms, Montipora eating nudibranchs, like that sort of thing, that's to a true problem level. Well, that's two major product lines that you don't have. Because you can't, it's not just like, oh, you shouldn't sell those things. Obviously, you really shouldn't sell those things. But those things won't be farmable long term. Like the pests will eat the corals faster than the corals grow. You will simply run out of acropora over time if you're unable to deal with that as a chronic issue. Things like aptasia, you can do things even at scale here. You can do things that will blanket eliminate them. But eventually that solution in itself will lapse, and then you will get aptasia again because it'll be, I don't know, some little molecule of aptasia in an overflow box, and then it'll eventually repopulate the entire system. So at various times we've had like aptasia grow. We put in like the aptasia eating nudibranchs. One day, all the aptasia are gone. 3 months later, in some system that doesn't have like either a peppermint shrimp or a copper band butterfly, it'll pop back up again. As an aside, this is why we don't really like to keep refugiums. That's more of like a hobbyist thing. The reason why we don't like to keep refugiums is because in a tank that does not have that type of predation, that is where pests will persist. Not that they won't persist elsewhere, but that's like really asking for it. So, long story long. It's unavoidable. It is part of the hobby that you should be expecting to deal with. There's definitely some places that do it better than others, but again, it's like these things will happen. Definitely don't go into it thinking that it is on somebody else's plate to protect your tank. That ain't happening for sure. Tom, so yeah, like 30 minutes ago, Tom responded, anyone who says that they're free of pests is lying. Or very naive. Like, I would never say that we don't have pests. That's bonkers insane. Okay. What do you dose, John Williams? And why don't more people dose Triton method? Okay, so let's deal with dosing and Triton method stuff. Okay, so I've never actually done Triton method. Okay, so what are we dosing? Right now we set a baseline with doing modest water changes. Nothing crazy, not like we do like 45% a week. Nope. We do very modest water changes. The bigger your systems are, the less percentage of water changes you will really be doing. Most of the water really exits here from like shipping more than anything else, less so like dedicated water changes and dedicated siphoning, especially now that our life support is getting like beefed up. We're getting a lot more direct removal of like detritus and things like that. So just swapping out water does less and less for us. So we set a baseline, again, modest water changes. On top of that, we do pretty big calcium reactors. We run geocalcium reactors mainly. We have the biggest ones they have, the 12-inch guys that weigh a ton once they get filled up. And then we have a secondary chamber. So we run a media in the main chamber that is the Two Little Fishies Reborn. That is like the natural stuff that you would find like on a beach in Vietnam, for example. The secondary chamber is aragonite reactor media, ARM, the high magnesium formulation. When we were running that one entirely even in the main chamber, our magnesium was through the roof. Now our magnesium is depleted. So we added a secondary chamber that kind of binds up any kind of like excess CO2 and is also supplementing magnesium. Now, past that, once our stony corals get really cranking, the calcium reactor plus water change does not keep up. So now we are supplementing a lot of our top off with kalkwasser. We've set up a dosing system, and depending on the system, we will crank in gallons of calc per day. After that, if we still need to tweak something, we do like alkalinity, the one part of the two-part alkalinity. And so that would be like the soda ash. Because we like to try to elevate pH just a little bit, we do soda ash. Past that, we are trying to elevate our potassium slightly, so we're directly dosing that. And we just started to do trace elements because we've had like several months of ICPs now, and our trace levels for a lot of different things were low. Now, I am not trying to hit specific numbers with trace elements. Like some people really like to tweak that stuff. I'm not like that. I just want to get it off of zero, because once you've bottomed out on a trace element, that's when you might see like colony collapse and things. So as long as I get off of zero, I'll be happy, because that means that there's some bioavailability out there. We're good. It might be still chronically low. Don't care. Just get it up off of zero. So that, in a nutshell, is it. I'd say that the 3/4 of what we do is really just trying to manage pH, alkalinity, calcium, but so kind of like the stony coral building stuff, and the rest of it is kind of like a low level thing. Oh, to go one step further, and why like a place like us, we don't do something like a Triton or like a Reef Moonshiners thing, is I think that that sort of thing, kind of like mad scientisty stuff where you're kind of like tweaking very, very, very individual specific things, very cool if you got one system. Uh, if you have like 12 systems, now testing becomes a major problem because you're not sending out one test every like couple weeks to a month. You're sending out a dozen. And I'm not about that action at all. Like we send out enough as is. So yeah, and by the way, that's a dozen every single time you want to test. And lately we have been, but that's because we were trying to do something very, very specific and but across the board. If we would really wanted to dial in and tweak stuff, I mean, you are talking about at least once every 2 weeks. And yeah, for like one aquarium, you could have like a testing budget in mind where that might maybe make sense. But at scale, not my jam at all. And by the way, that's assuming that you're not doubling up on tests, which you should do, just to make sure that like all the lies are consistent. Okay. I am taking your advice on the T5 lighting. Do you know the par rating that a 4-bulb T5 fixture gives off? I don't know the par rating, and it's going to be dramatically different as it ages. So I think that like between like 0 to 6 months is going to be a significant drop. From 6 to 12 months is going to be a big drop. And anything after that, it's not only going to be a par drop, it's going to be a color shift also. So there's a lot going on with T5. So you really should keep up with bulb replacement only for consistency's sake. We are terrible at it. If you saw like the Reef Builders video where they took a look at our greenhouse, there was bulbs from like 2021 that we hadn't changed. So that's why a lot of our stuff is transitioning over to LED, because in practice, we're bad at T5. John, what's your website? It is linked up at the top, tidalgardens.com. And if you want to look for the live sale items, it's tidalgardens.com/live. Pinned comment up top. Okay. Do you offer fish? Hell no. I suck at fish so bad. I can't even describe how bad at fish we are. Fish are hard. They're really hard. Like the people that do fish well, God bless them. Like I've had Patrick from Reef Wholesale here on 2 different occasions. Picked his brain both times. I still suck at fish, and he's the biggest like fish wholesaler in Canada. Like his facility is very good. He's very knowledgeable. He does this stuff all the time. Runs millions of dollars of fish import through his system. He knows what he's talking about because he is in the business of knowing what he's talking about. I suck at fish. Absolutely not. And it's also heartbreaking when you suck at fish because I mean they just look at you and coral, they look at you less as you're running them through a bandsaw. Dangles are in the fleece roller game. If so, which ones do you like? I've never used a fleece roller. People like it a lot. I have never messed with it. I just use filter socks and wash them. Ricardo Garcia, hi Than. I was watching the latest BRS video featuring you and Ryan. Excellent advice. Thank you. I really enjoyed talking to Ryan. It's one of those things where we just had really, really good chemistry, and I've only really met him like on a couple of occasions before going to like the BRS headquarters and filming. But yeah, like the conversations were like super smooth. We talked about cool stuff. We bounced ideas off of each other, and we literally sat there for 8 hours in one day and cranked out 8 videos that were about an hour long a piece, like back to back to back to back to back all day. And yeah, it was super super smooth. And I actually rewatched that video this morning. I thought it was like a really I was like, dude, I love this conversation because this is the sort of stuff that I think about all the time. And it was really cool just to have that conversation with him for their channel. And it was like, yeah, that was really, really sweet. What's the name of the acro on the video cover page? So the thumbnail, what was it? Dude, I don't know. Like, when it comes to those Teniuses, I really get lost. It kind of looks like a Jolt, but there's like 10 other ones that also look like a Jolt. And I don't recall ever acquiring one. So I have a feeling that what we have might be similar to that, but might not actually be that. Which is ironic because it's also my favorite looking acro that we have. I just don't know what it's called. Serge, what's your opinion on water changes? I love them. Frequency, tank percentage. It really, it's gonna depend a little bit. If you have a smaller tank especially, you don't have a great reason to not do water changes. Like especially if you have like a 20-gallon tank or less, you could do like a 5-gallon water change a week, and you're going to be so much better off than most people's experiences in this hobby, just because it's so easy for you to do like a 5-gallon water change. If you have a really big tank, water changes become more of a challenge. Just storing that kind of salt becomes a challenge. Like we get pallets of salt. It sucks to have just to like find places to put it all. Charles, do you take your videos underwater or through the glass? Through the glass. Also, is the coral rotating or the camera rotating? The camera is on a robot. Our camera setup here is messed up in how technically advanced it is. Like it's crazy. I'm like hours behind in chat probably, so I apologize. Let's see. Brandon is asking for the video about the ideal frag tank. What would you do for filtration? BioBricks and Microbacter. So we use the BioBricks. We're using, the heck are those things called? Marine Pure. Okay, we're using Marine Pure. Some people don't like it because they with any kind of like ceramic fired thing, you might get like some bump up in certain metals like aluminum and stuff. People have commented about that. For a while there, we actually did see like an uptick in aluminum, but over time it goes down. So I'm like, who cares? Oops, I bumped the mic. But if you have access to like clean-ish live rock, by the way, going back to like the whole pest discussion, live rock is wonderful, but you can't be a live rock is wonderful person and also be a I want to keep a perfectly sterile pest-free tank guy, because live rock it's going to have the craziest pests or just craziest things that might not even be necessarily pests, but one day you just might have like a 3-inch long crab show up. It's like, how did that happen? It was always there, it just finally grew to the size that you noticed it. Like stuff like that could happen. But as far as like the consistency of live rock, all of that stuff, live rock is amazing. John Williams with the 1999 super chat. Thank you, John. Appreciate the knowledge. With the filter socks, do you just take them out of the sump and throw them in the wash or what? You the man. Okay. So you can take them and just throw them into the washing machine, okay? But the amount of stuff that gets collected in there, you probably want to pre-rinse it. So what I do is I turn them inside out, rinse it out as best I can, squeeze it a little bit, and then they're still like dirty, don't get me wrong. Then I soak that in bleach. And that really breaks up a lot of the scum and gunk for a few hours, if not even overnight. And then I will throw them into the washing machine for like a couple of cycles. One where they're inside out, then I, then I straighten them back out and then run it again because I want to make sure that like all the chlorine residuals are out. But that's kind of like my process. Like we go through a lot of filter socks because we use the 100 micron filter sock, and those get extra dirty because I'm really trying to polish up that water. So whenever I have to clean filter socks, it is an ordeal. It takes me, it could take me an hour at the sink, spraying them out and stuff like that. It sucks, but I do it because I know how effective it is. And the fact that we're running that aggressive of like mechanical filtration, a lot of certain things that are a nuisance, like for example, like vermitid snails, I want to get to a point where I can feed my tanks aggressively again. And unfortunately, when you do that, you promote filter feeders like vermitids. But when we're running like super aggressive, like micron filtering like this, the times that you're not feeding, you're starving out those snails, things like that. So I would say that we're finally at the point where our vermitids are mostly gone. They're always going to be around, but they're at this point you would have to like actively search them out rather than them just like staring you in the face all the time. So again, that's what makes the filter sock thing big time, easy, yes, whatever it takes. Let's do that. Okay. Also, Charles was asking, how do you run the daylight blue color change? Is it done with lighting or editing? This is editing. It would be cool to do it with practical, but I don't know if it's going to be really that different. Certain corals are better about the special effect than others. Me. Let's see. My peppermint shrimp ate my Bergia nudibranch. Job security, I guess. Yeah, I can imagine. Like a hungry peppermint will eat all kinds of things. Barry Goss Senior, how's your iodine levels? Low probably. Most of our trace elements right now are low, and my only goal is to get them off of 0. B is saying, I really like Than and Ryan's dynamic. Seems super chill. Yeah, I think that I have like a luxury about being super chill with Ryan because I think that a lot of industry guests would feel a little bit more pressure than I would because like a potential deal with bulk reef supply is a really big deal. Like it's like a life-changing deal. And so I think that if that possibility is in the background, you're going to be nervous talking to one of like the guys there, right? Whereas me, I don't have that. So when I was on there as like as a guest, like it's just me hanging out. So there's no it's not even an ulterior motive. It's not like, so there's no carrot even in that ballpark. Like they don't sell coral, right? They would never be like, we're going to be, we're looking for like a coral supplier, and there's none of that. It's literally just like two hobbyists talking about reefs. That is it. That's all that I was planning to go there for. That's all that they were expecting, and we were just rapping. Let's see. Siam fish collections. Do you have your own private collection? A favorite, never be to be replaced corals. I definitely have my favorites, but I think that the idea is that all of these things are going to be propagated and made available. So I don't. I have favorites, but none of them are like sacred cows, so to speak. Sebastian, Than, I have a Massalea colony and really enjoyed and obscure corals like that. Any tips for keeping Massalea long term? Um, yeah, I would make sure that it gets fed a couple times per week. I think that that would probably be the most impactful thing you could do. Dances with fishes. Time to visit Nathan. I haven't seen Nathan in like a year. So here's the timetable with Nathan. Uh, his kids are involved in like a million summertime activities, and uh, as a result, he's like busy dad the entire time. So I think his boy is like in like five different sports leagues or something like that. So he's constantly being like sports dad. So I think that I did chat with him somewhat recently, and we'll actually have to hang out. Get him. I'll have to get him and Becca back on stream, and we'll just torture ourselves with more hot wings or something like that. That was like a fun show. If you guys didn't know, years ago, we just decided to do like a hot ones challenge. Like we made like little hot ones trailers for like different of these like death sauces, and we started off pretty spicy and ended up into like like the million plus Scoville land, and that was like such a fun show because it was just us three struggling with these super hot wings. Good times. Have you looked into Dr. Reef's quarantine corals? Have you thought about doing that? No, I think I bought a couple fish from him once before, but that's about it. Filefish solves hydrates for me. Just catch them before they eat too much coral. I've never kept one of those filefish before. They do seem to do a lot of really good things, and then they eat corals. So yeah, that's sounds like that experience is right on par. My major issue with marine pure is that it breaks down. Yeah, it kind of gets spongy. Yeah, I have noticed that. Range, what do you think of adding oysters to reef tanks? I would think that an aggressive filter feeder like that will starve. Um, uh, if you want to do so, I've seen video where they put oysters into a tank that is like murky to the point where you couldn't see more than 3 inches into the tank, and within 24 hours, that water was like sparkling. I think people greatly underestimate how much those things eat. Um, like the best oysters I've ever had at restaurants and stuff like that were in places where I wouldn't want to swim in the water. Like that's how gross the water was. Like we were in Japan, and they had like the best the best oysters. Best I've ever had. But that water was green, like pea soup green. And I've also had like clams or I'm sorry, oysters in New Orleans. And that water, I ain't getting in that water. But those clams or mussels, clams, any shellfish, delicious, insanely good. So no, I would not keep them in my tank. Hannah SB, any advice on rock flower anemones? Nothing really. They just kind of hang out for us. I suppose you could feed them. I mean, that goes for a lot of different corals and anemones. Um, no, they're super beginner friendly. They're tough. Yeah. Serge, what's some Astria snails from Tidal Gardens? How do these survive with how often they tip over? They're amazing cleanup crew. Serge, I honestly think they don't survive. Like in a natural reef, if a snail like that flips over, something's gonna eat it. Like they probably don't survive. I I wonder if they just outbreed the predator's ability to eat them up because that's a dumb snail. But yeah, they do a good job when they're not flipped over. That tie-dye pectinia, do you have more frags of it? I won't be able to get a frag till next month's coral budget. Um, we are actively propagating it. It might be a slightly slower thing being an LPS, but all of our pectinia are in the process of getting cut. Chris Cunningham. Thoughts on trace elements? My ICP test came back with a ton of trace elements not detectable at all. Yeah, I'm kind of in that ballpark. I'm dosing calc and would like to supplement trace elements. What's the best method to elevate? So, I had mentioned this earlier in the stream, but my only goal with trace elements is to get off of 0. If it says your iodine level should be at blank, I don't care. Your manganese should be at such and such, don't care. Non-zero is what I'm after, and not over the target, right? So what I've decided to do was we are going to just use a blanket trace element supplement. There's lots of them out there. You choose your favorite brand. Personally, I don't have a great way to evaluate these things. So hopefully we're dosing stuff that's not terribly polluted with other things. And my only goal is to make the trace elements bioavailable, but not overdose it. We are slowly, and I mean really slowly, adding it into our systems. The stuff that we get is kind of concentrated, so in order for us to dose it slowly, we could be ultra careful, and even if it's like just like a few drops, you can mix those few drops into like a big thing of RO water and then drip that slowly into your tank, almost like as a top off. Or in our case, well, we have like a 500-gallon sump. We could just use like an eyedropper and just put in like a few drops per day. It'll kind of like, mix into that, then get distributed into the aquariums. So slowly and non-zero is what I'm after. Roy, good afternoon. I did an ICP test. Manganese very high, but the rest of the trace elements very low. What could cause this? A bad test could cause that. It would be weird for one thing to be high and the rest of it to be low. Again, this is one of those things where like if you wanted to be like slavishly looking at ICP tests, send 3 of them of the same water on the same date and see what shows up, because ICPs are incredibly susceptible to user error. A lot of it comes down to handling. Yeah, I mean, you might even like. I know that I'm just making ICP companies tons of money, but seriously, like send off 2 to 3 tests to one and one to another. So that's 4 tests, and just see if all their lies match up. Chances are they won't. And what you're looking for is trends, right? You don't. I would not recommend slavishly adhering to what those numbers are, and especially if you get like an outlier manganese reading one day, don't do anything crazy, right? Or if you wanted to be like super proactive, do a water change. Don't get really creative. Be like, I need to add some sort of exotic thing that's going to soak up trace elements so that I can reduce my manganese. Nah, chances are somebody done goofed on an ICP test. That is very easy to do. There's folks out there that are like, ICP as a technology doesn't make sense in a saltwater sample. Like there's you can get really in the weeds on like the technology itself was never designed to do what they're doing now, and it leaves a lot, and I mean a lot, of risk of none of this matters. Like this is not valid information. So I don't delve that deeply into those weeds. We've got like a number of different ways of testing stuff, and again, my idea for like a successful test is very, very, very basic, low bar, right? Low bar. I would not be trying to dial in very specific things. John Williams. I really like pulsing Xenia. How much of a concern should I have with it taking over my tank? So many people say don't do it, but do you think I can keep it under control? Um, here's the truth, okay? Almost any coral, if you do your tank successfully, will overgrow your tank. Some are more aggressive about it than others, but like a xenia colony that grows out of control, you can scale that back just by removing it and selling off or trading like cuttings. Okay, not the biggest deal in the world. Now, if your Paleothoa colony is growing out of control, now you have a very different problem on your hands, because you just like physically removing that could be life-threateningly bad. Xenia, who cares? On top of that, it is easy to remove. Like, go onto Amazon and just do like a search for like like stainless steel wood carving tools. It basically looks like a dental kit, and there's like a bunch of different little scraper heads and stuff like that. It will take you a half hour to an hour to elegantly prune back however much xenia that you like. Super easy. So should you be worried? No. If you like it, cool. I happen to think Xenia is one of the coolest corals ever in this industry. Ever. It pulses by itself. How cool is that? I want all of TG's Pectinia variety. They're so pretty. Yeah, that's one of those. That's one of those corals. By the way, thank you very much. Uh, that is one of those corals that I have like a soft spot in my heart for. That is not a popular coral right now, and I just want to collect all the different varieties and just propagate the heck out of them forever. There's not a ton of variety out there, but whenever I do see a color morph that we don't have, I'm like all over it. Just got the Space Invader Pectinia, and I am hooked. And yes, I know about the sweepers on these guys. Yeah, and it's weird that the Space Invader specifically is the one that has the sweepers. Most of the other ones don't. Port Wolf. I watched the BRS episode 8. Thanks for the content. By the way, looking at the lifespans on silicone for glass tanks, acrylic, and fiberglass, where would I get my most satisfying longevity? So okay, so fiberglass, one would think. I mean, there's like no seams, right? It would just kind of like sit there. Um, I personally just don't love tubs, so fiberglass never really was very high on my list. But there's plenty of places that like it quite a lot and utilize fiberglass. Cool, go for it. Let's go to acrylic next. From what I understand, an acrylic bond, especially if you're using like thicker walled acrylic, like the half inch, 3/4 inch, I think that bond is stronger than the material. So, like, you will have like a break in the pane before you would have a seam fail, if that makes sense. And especially if you're working with like bigger and bigger and bigger pieces, yeah, the deflection on the acrylic is going to be your bigger concern rather than um, a seam giving out. Like, that's very uncommon. And if you were hyper fixated on seam strength like I am, you can do the whole armored seam thing where you have an additional piece of material and then you glue that on there. So you have now another two tubes, I guess, like seams. Both acrylic and silicone would work in that way, right? And at that point, yeah, you're not that's not failing. That will not be the failure point. That should last forever. Now, I've heard many times that the glass silicone seam, it is not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. I look at it as when is perfectly acceptable if I'm already dead. So the tanks that I have literally zero concern about ever rupturing a seal because they're 3/4 inch glass tanks. They're not that deep, so like the pressure on the seams, not that much. Also, I have every internal seam armored, all the way around the bottom, all the way up the sides, and it has a Euro brace on top. So for anything to like damage that seam, it has to basically be able to turn 90 degrees, go through at least an inch of silicone, and then turn 90 degrees and go through another 3/4 to come out. That ain't happening. Not in my lifetime. That is redonkulously overbuilt, though. But you can overbuild these things to the point where seam failure it'll never be a thing. Never be a thing. 50 years? Who knows? Like, not a meaningful time frame. You will get bored of your tank in like 5 years. Who are we kidding? TG is going to make Pectinia super popular. Probably not. It's bizarre what becomes popular in this hobby. Let's see. In the lab with Lucy. What's your thoughts on urchins for cleanup crew? Good question. I like them. We don't use a lot of them. So the best ones from what my understanding are like the tuxedos. The last time we bought them, all of them died within a week. Now we were running a full tank treatment for algae control called fluconazole, and I wonder if like that somehow low-key poisoned them or not. But we lost a bunch of different ones as a result. So it might have just been bad timing. But I do like how they can chew down all the way to the coralline, because I'm one of those people that think that coralline is good, but it is the lesser of many evils. It keeps the stuff clean from like really annoying algae like hair algae. It'll kind of like fight back Valonia, because like if you have fast growing coralline, it'll actually cover up Valonia and kill it. But having it kind of pruned back by urchins, I like. So yeah, that would be my thing. I do like them. Do we do that great with them? Meh, I don't know. The other thing about urchins, and going back to our discussion about acrylic, I think urchins can scratch acrylic. And I know for sure coralline algae can. We have like a couple of acrylic tanks. So we're not completely like acrylic can die. We're not like that. But given the choice, glass every single time. Even though we're having glass hazing issues. I don't know if you guys saw my my video on alkali glass hazing, glass corrosion. But now we're up to 2 different panes that are now getting corrosion. Luckily, knock on wood, It's not on the main pane of any particular tank, but our SPS show tank, a 2 foot by 4 foot pane on the side. Luckily, it's facing back corner, but that one is getting hazing. I'll have to do an update on that tank. I haven't talked about that tank in forever, probably because it bores me. Rob says, I own a Reef Savvy tank, no Euro bracing. The build is incredible, so if you're willing to spend the money on the live animals, get yourself a top tier tank first. Yeah, I've got 10 Reef Savvy tanks. They're okay, they're pretty good. But I love me some Euro bracing, as discussed in the BRS video. $0.01 I've tried keeping urchins for whatever reason. I just can't. They're a catch-22. I'm guessing they don't survive for you either. Thoughts on keeping ganies? Best practices. Goniopora. So, one, they like to be fed. What they like to be fed is kind of up for discussion. So, for example, I know that Polyp Labs, their main food, Reefroids, was formulated specifically for Goniopora. It's a very rich food, and I know that a lot of people have had success with that. We are going to be getting back more into using a lot more like the powdered foods. We stopped because we were having like vermitid snails also loving the fact that we were broadcast feeding. But now that we've kind of like revamped our filtration system to the point where like, I think everything is going to starve unless we directly feed it. And that's kind of like where we want to be. So feeding is the first thing. The second thing is, I think that they are susceptible to a lot of like the weird things. And I am doing a sponsored video for Polyp Lab for their product called Reef Primer, which is a potassium salt coral dip. And I actually even had to purchase like a small specialized aquarium to do all this footage and everything like that. And so we're culturing like all of these ganies, right? And they're all doing like great. They're all super colorful, super nice. And my favorite color morph is probably like the amaze balls. It's very expensive, like bright yellowish red and all fun stuff, right? All of them are doing great except for one. One of them has just been like super tight looking and it's been closed up for like 3 weeks. Like, well, that's not great. I'm thinking it's probably some bacterial nonsense. So just for the heck of it, I take it and I put it into my specialized dip container thingy, point a camera at it with like a macro lens. And guys, there is a world within world within world when it comes to like when you start to look at stuff under any kind of magnification, okay? Because there is so much stuff you cannot see with the naked eye. This particular one had ciliates, which is kind of like an amoeba of sorts. Can't see them, but under like microscopy practically, you can see them. And I think that most corals can just like fend these things off, or if they're around, it doesn't matter. But I think that once a colony starts to go downhill, these things become more of an issue. I was actually reading a study about ciliates, like an actual research study. So maybe we can talk about this for like one of our reef receipts videos. But this is kind of just an observation in reefs that in declining colonies that are found in the wild, you will also find ciliates. Now, that could be like, is it causation? Is it just coincidence? Because I've had ciliates on some Acropora before that are legitimately the nicest acros that we've ever kept. And it wasn't even close. Like the polyp extension was so much that you could barely see the underlying flesh. The coloration was perfect, but it had ciliates. So how bad could they possibly be if they were on the nicest acros that we've ever successfully kept, right? Like there's other acros that didn't have ciliates. They didn't look better. I can guarantee that. So yeah, where am I going with that? My hope is that if the ciliates really start to make an impact, um, my point is, if stuff starts to look suspicious, dip it. Now, the reason why I'm kind of advocating for Reef Primer specifically and not just any dip is because when you're kind of worried about first, do no harm, right? Reef Primer tends to be very gentle. It might not be the absolute like weapon of choice against any particular specific thing, right? But it works pretty good on a lot of things. And more importantly, it is, as far as like the stuff that I've messed with, the least likely thing to kill your corals. Because there's some really good dips out there that you can't really go hard on, because an aggressive dose of that stuff could also kill your coral. So if you don't really know what you're going after and you're just kind of suspicious about a coral that's been closed, like a Goniopora, you might want to go with the most gentle thing first and seeing if that just handles it. So anyway, like I said, down the road here in a month or so, I'm going to be doing a sponsored thing all about that, but I'm going to be showing like very specific things that it does handle. Hopefully that helps answer your question about Gonies. Banzi29, I dust mine with a mix of reefroids and C-Chem fuel. We just started back up on C-Chem. Again, that was one of those things that we had dialed back. I really like Aquavitro fuel. Again, we had to stop because it's like, you know what? Soda vermitid snails. Our acros almost made an immediate improvement when we started to mess with that. Brandon, can you do a video on how to treat zoopox by doing the scraping method? I can't find furin and haven't seen a detailed video on how to scrape poppet. Sure, maybe. That might be a challenge for me to film, but I can try. I can try. Having said that, knock on wood, and this might be again me being a little bit naive, we don't have a lot of zoopox. We've been better about keeping our zoas lately and keeping them clean. And when you can keep them cleaner like that, they tend to not have zoopox issues. Chris Cunningham, in your opinion, what's the most important aspect to improve coloration? Coloration specifically, okay? So, first thing, I would say make sure that there's nothing actively eating the coral. If there's something that's pestering a coral, it will not have peak coloration no matter what you do. So make sure that it is unharassed and growing. So now I'm assuming that you have a healthy, growing, brown, ugly coral. Lighting is probably 90% of the battle at that point. Like, lighting is so important. It is how you view these things. It is how to get a lot of things to color up properly. After that, you're talking about water flow and chemistry. But lighting is the king. Didn't you mention something about a flatworm problem in the past? I was looking at the blue velvet nudibranch and wondering if it ate that species of flatworm. Okay, so flatworms come and go. Like The only flatworm that I really worry about are like the acro eating ones. The LPS ones, meh, you can dip them pretty easily. They don't really spawn that fast or anything like that. I don't really care. The ones that show up in your glass, I really don't care. And the blue velvet nudibranch does eat those. It eats a couple of the other ones as well. The problem is they're all toxic, and I've literally got those blue velvet nudibranchs, put them in my tank. Within 5 minutes, they're eating them. They're eating all those like different flatworms. I'm like, great. Within 10 minutes, they are rolling around on the bottom of the tank, dying from poisoning. So no, I don't think that is a good solution to your flatworm issue. What tends to be an amazing solution for us, and this is probably not something that most people can do, we take everything out of a single aquarium. We give it a quick rinse in some kind of dip, catch all the fish, empty that tank out, fresh water, spray it down, scrape it all up, and put it all back in with new salt water. That does wonders for dealing with any kind of flatworm issue. And does it eradicate anything? No, not really. It comes back, but it comes back months and months and months later. So it buys you so much time. Another like flatworm that comes in, because when you buy a lot of snails, like when you buy like, let's say 3,000 snails, sometimes one of them snails is not a snail at all. It is a polyclad flatworm, which happens to be kind of snail looking, and it's in a shell. And you know what they do? They eat snails. So you start stacking up like hundreds of dead snails one day, and you're like, you know what? I bet I know what's going on here. And sure enough, when we do like this big cleansing of a tank, it's like, oh yeah, look, there was a predator actively eating snails for months, that sort of thing. But you're gonna run into that because we inspect every snail that comes into this place, and yeah, every now and again you might miss a polyclad, or the polyclad is a tiny little alien baby, and one day it turns into like a real honest to god xenomorph and it eats all your snails. So stuff like that can happen. But am I worried about it as like a flatworm problem? No, not really. And it's not something that you're really going to stop if you're dealing with thousands of snails. And we're like not even really in the business of like bringing in tons of snails to sell. Like we bring in snails to eat algae, and if they happen to sell, cool, great. And obviously when we're sending them out to you guys, we're going to make sure that it's an actual snail. But no, when you bring in like I can't imagine like Reef Wholesale, like Patrick's outfit. I forget like how many peppermint shrimp that he says that he brings in on a batch, but I think it was like more peppermints than I've ever owned personally, times 1,000. Like it was like on that scale. Like I think he regularly gets shipments 1,000 times more than my entire reef hobbyist career for that type of thing. So yeah, the idea that we're gonna stop a specific snail eating flatworm that looks like a snail. Good luck. Good luck to all of you. By the way, that means that somebody collected this thing, thought it was a snail, put it into their system, thought it was a snail, then sent it to us because they thought it was a snail. Kind of whack. Let's see. Rami. Hello, new reefer saved from the freshwater world. Freshwater's cool. I just haven't done it in forever. First of all, I would like to thank you for your content, as it tends to be more advanced and informative than most short videos. I think our content skews that way for sure. I think it's perhaps a little bit more inaccessible, so we're never going to be like super popular, but this is the sort of stuff that interests me. Like it's kind of like the more cutting edge stuff, not like hyper experimental, but a little bit more of a deeper dive, a little bit more of like the upscale tech that a lot of people don't uh, either don't have access to or would never um, have use for, but I think is really cool. So yeah, that's kind of like my lane, I guess. I have a paper where they were looking for coral pathogens in algae on ailing reefs. There was no overlap except for the ciliates. I think ciliates are just everywhere. It's like, oh yeah, it's like bacteria. It's going to be around. I want to ask for tips on budget-friendly, eye-catching, colorful, fluorescent corals. LPS-dominated mixed reef. Okay. Colorful fluorescence. You could do really well looking through like the favites, like Favia and favites, because they're not insanely expensive. They are things that can be propagated. Generally speaking, the stuff that can be propagated will be at a lower price point than the stuff that has to be imported only. So, for example, Homophilia australis, like the scolemia, likely will always be expensive, right? Stuff like that. So Favias are fast enough growing. You can get some really cool color morphs at a decent price. If you wanted to dabble a little bit into the SPS, there are things like Leptoceras, Cyphastria, things of that sort that play well with that type of LPS tank, and very inexpensive and easy to keep. Please tell us more about that purple plating photosynthetic sponge that was just on. Nothing really to talk about. Like, treat it like you would a plating Montipora, and you'll be just fine. It's literally just like that. Looks like it, acts like it. How do I get rid of a bacteria bloom in my nano reef without UV sterilizer? The bloom is sucking all the nitrates in my tank and hurting my LPS corals. So here's the thing about a bacteria bloom like that. You could, I mean, a nano reef. There's not a lot you can do about a nano reef. Like, eventually it'll kind of just starve itself out. But I know protein skimming oftentimes can be very good to reduce bacterial populations, but essentially it's not going to go away until it kind of like a rage fires out, because the minute that you add more nutrient, it's going to start blooming again, and it's going to bloom within like hours. So it's either you UV sterilize it, aggressively protein skim it out, or you just wait till it runs out of fuel. Do you have experience with no pox? No. Or carbon dosing in general? Yes. My question is it better to dose the entire amount once daily or spread out the entire day and dose via doser? This is something that you're going to have to play with for yourself, Charles, because I don't like it at all. Like, you really have to full commit to doing a lot of that direct bacterial stuff, because I've told this story before. When we messed with it, we were using like 1/4 or 1/10 the required dosage, but it's a bacterial product, so it went crazy and it killed like a third of all of our corals. It's not something that I would like to revisit. Like, the entire methodology, not into it. Peppermint shrimps are bad. I saw them munching on my jawbreaker mushrooms. Instantly remove them. It's possible. Peppermint shrimp can serve a very good function. They can also eat coral. That goes for a lot of things. I've had tangs eat corals. I've had foxfaces eat corals. I've had copper bands eat corals. Not everything is a deal breaker just because it ate a coral. Let's see. Courtney Jameson. I need bumblebees. Have you tasted the snozzberry Diaceres to see if it does indeed taste like snozzberries? It does not. I can almost guarantee. I need bumblebees. Yeah, so bumblebee snails are super good. And I think that we will be having more and more available as we go because I think that they are running out of verminids to eat. Because, like I said, we've gotten better at stripping the water out from filter feeding type foods. And I think that now they're just kind of like munching down on Astrea snails. So if there wasn't a polyclad flatworm, there's definitely bumblebee snails that are eating snails. Such is life. Port Wolf. The powerhead polishing filters you mentioned before. Are there large versions on the commercial scale out there? Not in the form factor of like a powerhead, because those polishing filters are basically like a Marineland powerhead that's stuck on a micron filter. But you can find like micron canisters, like from, I think it's called, there's a couple companies. One is, I think it's called like a nuclear, NU-clear. And that's like a big pleated one, so you have to like provide your own pump and everything like that. It's usually like an external like filter that you would put on a cart, that sort of thing. So something like that is a possibility. There's also like, and I don't know if they make these anymore, but it's like a Lifeguard perhaps makes something like that. But these are all like, you would mount those onto a cart. It's not just like you just throw it into your tank. I guess the other option, because if this is something like if you're looking for micron filtering, filter socks. Filter socks are very, very good at exactly this sort of thing. Should I stay away from zoas because of the toxin? No. A lot of people have zoas but don't have issues with the toxins. I would probably stay away from Paleothoa specifically, because pallies, especially like, well, any pallies really, I always feel a little sicker messing with those. And we have like an overflow box that's covered in them, and I'm like, man, I don't know a good way to deal with this. Like, I don't want my staff to like scrape that stuff up and remove it. I mean, it's always a risk, right? If you do something dumb, or if somebody else does something dumb, or your dog does something dumb, it's like it's possible, right? Bad things can happen. But having said that, a lot of people don't have a problem with it. But if it makes you uncomfortable, then yeah, definitely don't, because there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that could be analogous visually to something like that without the associated issues. So I guess like I kind of gave you a murky answer, didn't I? I would say that the risk, highly mitigatable for those that keep zoanthids, is probably not something that's even top of the mind, because it's just not a huge risk in practice, right? How many people have palytoxin poisoning versus how many people that are in the hobby that have zoas, right? The other side of it is, if it is actually impacting your enjoyment of the hobby and this gives you anxiety, don't do that. Like, for that reason alone, it's like, if you're going to be constantly worried about like a toddler getting into your zoas and doing something bad, or like a cat or a dog or something sticking their nose into it when it shouldn't, okay, now it's like it's impacting your enjoyment of the hobby. Yeah, probably not worth it. Get something else that looks similar. You can find it. Advice on fragging zoas and pallies. Don't. Just don't. Um, Again, it's one of those things where you can just get a lot of experience with it. I don't like to cut pallies. Like, I'm good on that. I if like if one day we just hard committed to, like, you know what, we're just gonna get rid of all the pallies in our systems. We're just never gonna sell them. I'd be like, fine, I don't care. Like, the amount of money that we make on pallies, I would happily just, if I could, like, Thanos snap my fingers and all the pallies in my tanks just vanished, I'd do it, because I don't love them so much that I would want to keep it around. And any, like, loss in revenue, I don't care, like, whatever. But is it a huge deal for us? No, as long as somebody doesn't run it through a saw. That'd be nice. Don't run zoas and pallies through a saw. Like, don't be dumb. Don't boil it with water. Don't, like, set it outside on a rock. So this is actually kind of interesting, I guess. If you did want to eradicate it, from what I understand, you can gently scrape away at it and remove it, like, small section by small section. And if you soak that thing in, like, concentrated bleach, that will neutralize the toxin. It is. I've only heard that one time from somebody that should know. Heard that from Joe Yaulo from Long Island Aquarium. Separate coasts. Now, he's at the Long Island Aquarium, and that's what he did to get rid of his Paleothoa. He scraped it up, bleached it, and that neutralizes it, according to him. Okay, that is how I would probably approach it as well. But yes, I'm very scared of, like, putting it into something and it aerosoling the stuff and getting everybody around me sick. I was wondering, can one use this canisters with a UV bulb as an addition in sump instead of UV fixtures, so they can have the extra water polishing plus UV? Yeah, as long as the flow rate going through the UV is correct. So UV is one of those things where oftentimes, if it is not effective, it is because the flow rate going through it is not properly adjusted. Like, a lot of times people don't have the ability to properly measure flow, so they're going off of, like, what the pump says it can do, things like that. But you want it to go slow enough through the UV that the UV has a chance to kill and break down whatever is going through it. Reef King, thanks for the video you do. You help so many reefers all over the world. Well, thank you. I'm glad that you appreciate it. Glad that you guys are watching it all. How do you frag zoas? Scissors? I would prefer scissors over anything, yeah. Fragging pallies let off a very toxic slime. Put gloves on. Yeah, I don't even like touching pallies. Like, sometimes just, like, grabbing a colony with your hand, it's like I immediately feel it. That's worrisome, right? I have a rock in my tank that was taken over by cat's eye zoas and utter chaos pallies. Technically, I think your utter chaos pallies are actually just another zoa. They might have less palitoxin than an actual pally. There's very few actual pallies in the hobby. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of big polyp zoas that are called pallies. We do it also. They're not really pallies. Like a Paleothoa grandis is a pally. Like those Texas trash pallies are pallies. There's, like, green ones that are pallies. But stuff that kind of looks more like a zoa is probably a zoa. Even if it's like 4 times the size of the small zoa. That's what I need to find, some non-mechanical flow meters. It might be overrated also. You could put like a DC pump on it that's just controllable and just make sure that, it's on a fairly low setting. I thought so, but that's what the guy in LFS told me they were. Makes sense. No, a lot of places. Okay, so we are not coral taxonomists here. This is my little PSA about coral taxonomy, okay? This is not even remotely our skill set or our interest set. My number one goal is when people are looking for coral, that they find what they're looking for here. So if they're looking for utter chaos pallies, I want them to find it at tidalgardens.com. So I'm kind of meeting the community halfway, and there's that divergence of where the community and the reef hobbyist community and the scientific community greatly diverge, because there's a lot of things that get shuffled around. There's a lot of, like, for example, Favia. Earlier in the show, I said something Favia. There are no Favias in the reef aquarium trade. Guaranteed, absolutely none, okay? How do I know this? Because Favia at one time had 100 different species. It has been reclassified down to 2 species. Those 2 species are both found in the Caribbean. So, if you have one of these 2 species in your tank, you are committing a felony. And those 2 species have probably never been collected in the last 30 years of this hobby. So, very, 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 very unlikely that you or anybody else has Favia in their tank. But that's a giant category of the Tidal Gardens website. You know why? Because people are still looking for Favia. That's what we call these things. It is what it is. Why do Grandmaster Crack Zoas and Stratosphere Zoas love to melt away for no reason? I don't know. I've heard that. Knock on wood, they haven't done that for us just yet, but we are scared of that happening because apparently people do run into that issue. I don't know. I don't know why expensive Zoas like to melt. It's kind of weird. True Paleothoa will incorporate substrate into their flesh. True. Also, true Paleothoa have a slightly different genetic profile. Again, what are you going to do? Genetic test your Paleothoa? You're not. So that Avatar Chalice is so cool. Very cool and very fast growing too. I am looking for some yellow or gold tip cloves. I have most of them, but not the yellow or the gold. Yeah, I wish I could help you. We don't grow those that often here. For whatever reason, clove polyps, it's a weird one for us. It has never been that successful. They tend to just get very stringy, I would say. It's like, when you have like a strawberry plant, how they like send runners? That's kind of what they do for us. Okay, real quick. I want to say my thank yous because we have roughly 10 minutes left in the show. All right. Let's start with the YouTube folks first. Thank you, Mike Downey, Keith Holland, Steven13, JB Bryan, Terry Kuhn, Stories Reef, Herb777, Justin Harden, and Ohio Adventures. On the Patreon side of the equation, thank you to Angela Sherman, Big Lord Chi, Brandy Camp, Harkins Aquatics, Jeremy Altman, aka 2 Please, Scott Williams, Elaine Martinazzi, Alan Jackson, Ann Lewis, Christopher Martin, Chuck Admire, Ernie Wallace, Greg Bauer, Greg Zimmerman, Jordan Marty, Keith Singer, Kyle Jameson, Lisa Clow, Lacry Fine Art, Lynn Holt, Michael Shelley, Puddle Aquatics, Ryan Baker, Skylar Korn, Sue Hemmons, Thomas Tarrant, and Tim Garner. And of course, thank you to our two corporate sponsors, Ecotech Marine and Polyblab. Speaking of Ecotech Marine, I haven't talked to those guys in a little while. However, I do have like a standing invitation to go visit them in Pennsylvania. They're about a 6-hour drive away, and they would like to do some collaborative content. And I think it would be kind of cool to visit their facility and see how all this stuff is manufactured, because we do use quite a bit of Ecotech products. But yeah, let me know if that's something that you guys would be interested in, because we don't get to go do site visits that often. I don't get out much, you guys. But that has been something that we've been talking about for a while now. And I would, at some point, I'd just be like, hey, guys, I'm coming over. I'm bringing my camera. Where are we having dinner? That sort of thing. Okay, real quick. I need to use the bathroom. I've been drinking out of like a, what is this? A French press all afternoon. I will be right back, you guys. And I'm back. Have you ever tried setting up a Pico tank like the ones from P&W Customs? I have not. The small tank thing really isn't my thing. I know that there's plenty of other folks though that would be happy to give you that type of content. My stuff tends to be like big industrial stuff. In the lab with Lucy, your operation is second to none, and I'm sure that a lot of people appreciate your thoroughness. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I think we do a pretty good job, but I'm always so super critical of what we do here. So I'm like, always room for improvement. Banzi, are you going to be at Aquashella this year? I attended the Dallas show. Unfortunately, right now I don't have any plans to go to another one this year. I mean, I think that there's like a scheduling conflict for the one in Florida. Yeah, pretty much I have scheduling conflicts for the rest of this year for every show. Like right now, they're like Reefapalooza in California is going on, and I would have liked to have gone to that. Can't make it. So there's that. There's no MACNA this year, got canceled. Was looking forward to that. Reef Stock Chattanooga just showed up out of nowhere on a weekend that I had plans already. So it's like, nope, can't make that one either. So Unfortunately, yeah. Even though I don't get out a lot, I get out enough that there's scheduling conflicts with every show for the whole year. The Rainbow Dash Gani is awesome. Yes, it is. One of the nicest ones that we have. Ever try setting up a Bergie farm, Than? So I'm assuming that you're talking about a Bergia nudibranch farm. So yes, we actually have a 150 gallon tank right now that we are currently culturing Bergias in. We are going to change that slightly. So we have a fish quarantine system that is a triple decker rack. It's like 6 aquariums, two, right? And if you watched my videos about like the ideal coral whatever setup, and this is just generally any type of setup, there's an ideal height, meaning that if you're having a triple level thing, maybe the middle one is the right height. The top one is not going to be great because you have to step up on the stool. The bottom one you have to get it down on the floor to do anything with. So there's two of these that are just at a really bad height level to do anything with. Okay. And even running fish quarantine like that was no good for us. But guess what? It is in the back corner of our building. Highly neglected. That is the perfect place to grow Aptasia. It's out of the way. No one's going to see it. Like right now, our Aptasia farm for the nudibranchs is literally when you walk in the door. So you walk right into the new building. The first thing you see is a daylight lit Aptasia tank. I'm like, this is a great start. A great start to the visit to Tidal Gardens. As soon as you walk in, first impression, the Aptasia farm, right? So that will change to go all the way back to the back area there. And the nice thing about having 6 segmented tanks is that your biggest worry, I think, with growing nudibranchs is that they will get into the other tanks and they will then consume all of your Aptasia. Usually the nudibranch farming doesn't work well because you're not able to cultivate Aptasia well enough. Not that the nudibranchs themselves won't grow. So having 6 isolated tanks, and really what I'm thinking is we're only going to try to grow nudibranchs in one of the 6, and so the other 5 will just be to cultivate Aptasia. And my big brain idea is that by having like the 2 bottom tanks and the 2 top tanks being roughly a pain in the butt to access, that's like the perfect place to be growing the bulk of the Aptasia. So maybe like the 2 in the middle we could do something with Bergias in, but really it's to make it more of a hassle to get anything done in those tanks and just let Aptasia go crazy in that rack system, because we're going to be what do you call it, quarantining fish differently and in a different location anyway. So that rack system now has like a purpose in life. So I actually purchased like 6 canister filters from Siche, and that's going to be its sole form of filtration. There's not going to be any protein skimming or anything like that. Just 6 canister filters, and that makes it like super easy to maintain, super easy to do water changes. You just turn off the canister words. Turn off the canister filter. Take the output of the canister filter over to the sink. Turn the thing back on. It pumps the thing almost completely dry. Fill it back up with new salt water. You're done. That's your maintenance for the month. So easy peasy. B, I think Daytona is the only one you don't technically have a conflict for. You might be right. I guess I just didn't put the Daytona one on my calendar. I don't know. I'll have to talk to Sean. Okay. What is my most favorite coral? So my favorite coral changes all the time. I would say that if I had to pick one coral right this second, it would be an Amazeballs Goniopora. I really like Gonis. Chris Cunningham, have you ever done any videos with Lou Ekus of Tropic Marine? I really like both of your videos. It'd be really cool to see the two of you on one video. Um, this is gonna sound really bad. I don't think I've ever met Lou. If I have, Lou, and I don't remember, I'm sorry. um, I think the only person from Tropic Marine that I've met was the owner from Germany, I believe, at Magna. I think his name was Marcus, but I have not spoken to. By the way, there was like an 8 year span where I didn't go to any trade shows, so I was largely under the radar. And during that 8 year time period, I eventually became like YouTube popular. And so when I finally got back onto the scene of going to these shows and meeting people, it was a very different world. And so I'm just now kind of getting like more caught up with meeting people from different companies. And there are some folks in the industry, okay? They just don't watch a lot of YouTube. They have no clue who I am. And it is kind of funny. It is kind of funny. I've got some funny stories. So, for example, uh, so B and I, because she's friends with Julian Sprung of Two Little Fishies fame, and so Julian, and I went out to lunch, and this was at Reefapalooza, New York. And I've met Julian a couple of times before, but we never really talked. I kind of wanted to to take some time to actually to talk to him, introduce myself, and all that stuff. Um, so we went out to lunch. On the way out, by the way, we're not at the venue. Okay, we're like a block or two away from the Meadowlands, and upon leaving the restaurant, he was like, "Oh, we just saw some random people like sitting um, like in and around the shopping plaza." And they all like came up and started talking to me like I love your videos. Can we take a picture with you or something like that? It was a whole thing, and they didn't pay Julian any mind, and he was just like, "Oh, okay, I get the dynamic now. Okay." It's like he was so like not used to like not being like the center of attention in that way. But fast forward a bit, and we were at Magna in I guess it was Milwaukee, and we were coming back from a dinner. And when we got back to the Magna venue, he gets mobbed by like the business industry guys that have been around for like 30 years, and I was like the secondary person of interest. But yeah, I mean, there's like there's entirely people that just have no clue. It's kind of funny. Okay, anyways, we are well into overtime now, you guys. I do need to go. I need to grab some dinner in a bit, because right now there is a Lebanese festival going on where they make homemade Lebanese food. This is the last night. I'm going to go gorge myself on kebabs. So anyway, guys, I hope you guys have a good rest of the weekend. When is the next live thing that we're doing? Let me look that up for you guys real quick. Our next live show will be September 16th. So mark your calendars. If any of you guys actually purchase any corals, you guys will probably be getting an email from Ben about scheduling. Definitely double check your spam folders and whatnot. Most of everything will be going out Monday for delivery Tuesday, or Tuesday for delivery Wednesday. Let Ben know if you need a different date on that. Yeah, and this live show will stay active till, I don't know, Wednesday-ish. So plenty of time to shop for all the bits and bobs. All right, guys, that does it from here. Happy reefing.